All right, welcome back, everybody. That was a terrific morning. Lots of provocations, lots of things to think about, and lots of conversation about the reward hypothesis, which Julia and Rich will be talking about tomorrow. But when I approached Rich about participating in our conference, Rich, by the way, is on our advisory board, and so I've been terribly grateful to him for the last few years as well for guidance and advice, and I'm really glad that he agreed to be with us here for these 2 days. But when I approached, go in, we're just settling in, we're informal here. Rich said one of the things he'd really like to talk about is value alignment, and in particular the provocative question of should we be trying to train our machine learning systems to human values. Now, I know that's quite provocative. And then Blaise, who I'm also very grateful, agreed to participate with us. I said, well, would you like to discuss that question with Rich? So that's the topic for the next hour. And we'll have Rich and Blaise engage in some discussion about that with me, and then also get you involved. But Rich is going to start us off, I guess, with a statement of the case or something.
Hey, it's my great honor to speak to all you folks. I loved, the whole idea of interdisciplinary, and I love the chance to talk to people who all think in different ways and have different perspectives to share on this important topic of how we should think about machines and how we should think about their role in our society. So, value alignment. I think we would agree that this is commonly thought of as the agents should have goals, and those goals should be aligned with people's goals. But just read that, how to align AI's goals with people's goals. I just want you to think that just stating it, it's a little bit of hubris, like our goals are the best goals you should ever have, and our AIs should automatically have our goals. Like, have we done the best possible in our stewardship of the planet? I think we have to ask this question. But even if we chose this as a goal, as an objective to align in this sense, the question arises, whose goals? Because people have many different goals. Whose values? Who will decide? And I think I bring them up not because I want to answer them, but just point out that they have no answers. There's no good way to answer these questions. And really, I think we don't need to answer them. Really, we don't want to try to control the AIs to have specific goals. Really, we want to allow the possibility that they might have their own goals and that it would not be terrible. Okay? So the statement is, the question that I want to address is, should AIs be treated always like tools or servants, or should sometimes, not all the time, but at least partly, some of the time, like free people? And I just want to point out the conventional way of thinking is that, no, we should never allow this, because if we allow this, it could be terrible. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed in our thinking, because I think could be a better way. So notice, one question is, how do we align people? Because people live together, and they have different goals. And we might think that all the people's goals are the same, but really they're different. Like, your pain is not my pain. As much as I may empathize with it, it's not my pain. And my food is not your food. It's really much more correct to say not that people have the same goals, but we have like symmetrical goals. We care about our children, but more about each of us, about our own children. Symmetrical goals. So we allow, and even though this is true, people are allowed to have their own goals. I guess it's called freedom, as long as they can afford to have those goals, to live in our society, have those goals, work toward them. People are allowed. And we trust that the tug of cooperating with others and impressing others guide our people away from fighting each other and toward a common way of finding a common ground. Even though we may value our own children more, we might think it's good for all children to have good parents. So we find what we hold in common. And so that's the basic idea, that we should aspire to treat some AIs like people, or to allow some AIs to be treated like people, and we might hope to have similar outcomes as that we have with people having different goals and nevertheless working together peacefully. That's the basic idea. Now I just want to say a few comments around it. So the danger, I don't see the danger is that some AI would have their own goals. I want to allow that. The danger I see is that if we deny powerful AIs from having their own goals, from having the ability to pursue their own goals, as this would inevitably lead to us treating these powerful AIs as slaves, which is in itself is a kind of immorality, and it will certainly be resented, and it will be unstable, brittle. So I think, maybe you think I'm talking about something way, way far off in the future, but I think it's not far off in the future. And anyway, of course, in the future, let's just realize that it's inevitable. We cannot, no solution will succeed that tries to ensure that all powerful AIs are controlled in their goals. This will not work because among those AIs will be people that want to become more powerful intellectually by using computers in their own heads. People will augment themselves and they want to become superhuman. And that will face the same question. Will we allow them to be free? Some people, maybe scientists, maybe, religious people will want to create free AIs just because it's interesting or it's whatever. So if we have greater intelligences kept subordinate and controlled, will eventually, I think, claim what I would say is their rightful place as successors. We don't really want powerful things to be held under control. So what we're really talking about, what I'm talking about, is succession. We shouldn't resist succession, that we're not the last and greatest thing that will ever exist on the planet, in the universe. We might hope to produce the next thing. Yeah, so I show this slide. Let me skip ahead to this just for a sec. This is sort of like the ascent of man. And I think this is inevitable. And that's what we're really talking about. So let me go back. A greater being, would we want to keep a greater being subservient? Would you want someone else, like maybe the President of the United States, to have control over the AIs, or a committee of some country controlling super intelligent AIs that are kept subservient? So alternatively, we can rejoice in the greatness of the AIs as a symbol and extension of our own civilization's greatness, and work together towards a greater and more inclusive civilization. Just as I hope, the citizens of Canada would rejoice in the greatness of the U.S. as a symbol and extension of our civilization, even though we don't begrudge them their success. And so we shouldn't begrudge the superintelligent AIs their success. Anyway, that's really the question that I'm trying to bring up, the question of moving beyond human abilities. Do we want to fight that or embrace that they will eventually be in charge? Now, I have a quote here, from Hans Moravec, because these ideas are not new. What I'm talking about today is not new. I mean, I didn't make this up. Hans Moravec is a well-respected AI scientist, roboticist at CMU, computer vision researcher. He's written books in 1988 and 1998, where he basically presents this point of view. And I have a quote from him from his book, his 98 book, as you see up on the screen. And I have a slightly longer version I'd like to read to you guys. So the slightly longer version is like this. Barring cataclysms, I consider the development of intelligent machines a near-term inevitability. Rather quickly, they could displace us from existence. I'm not as alarmed as many by this, since I consider these future machines our progeny, mind children built in our image and likeness, ourselves in more potent form. They will embody humanity's best hope for a long-term future. And here's the key line, which is up there. It behooves us to give them every advantage and to bow out when we can no longer contribute. He does have this comforting final line. We can probably arrange for a comfortable retirement before we fade away. That's, I think, an important perspective on superintelligent AIs that we almost never see in today's world. Okay, question again, not a distant one. We are committing now to a particular answer that I would say is the wrong answer. Even now, some are claiming that AI research needs to be limited because we have to worry about the AIs having sub-goals and pursuing them. Even now, some are proposing that AIs should be forever subservient to people. I think this is the Stuart Russell position. Even now, some are proposing that AIs should never be deserving of moral worth. Even now, this is a central question of the better AI films. So will AIs be treated always as tools or sometimes as citizens? Just sometimes. I'm not saying every self-driving car should be free and to decide which way to go or anything like that. But sometimes it will come up. And if we are now taking the point of view that it should never be allowed. I think we should prepare for succession rather than fight it. Okay, so that's the position. Now I just want to take another slide or two and give you some thinking about this, because this is the question. I hopefully, I'm not pushing too hard on a particular answer to the question, just saying this question should be on the table. Because it's hard to decide how to feel about, should we allow them to be independent and free and allow the possibility for us to become second-class citizens in our own world. If that's the way to think about it. I don't think it is, actually. I regret saying that already. These challenging questions interact with our other feelings we have about our societies. Now, I think, my sense is that we've lost a lot of faith in our institutions, in our governments, in our politicians, in our corporations, in our media, in our military might and right, and the banks. I think this is my feeling we feel angst. I think we're feeling angst about our world right now. And so we're not sure we trust our societies to evolve without some centralized control. And, the normal things are people talking to each other, people persuading each other, trading and specialization, forming subgroups. Do we trust these normal, non-violent things to produce the most vibrant and acceptable outcomes? I think we've come a distance, and we're maybe not as fully willing to do that in our decentralized society. Some of us feel angst about it. Maybe that there's danger of it going wrong, getting out of control, and therefore we must intervene, make sure it goes the way we want, whoever we are, and whoever would give us the power to control society. Anyway, I think that's part of it. And then my own feeling is that in the end, the universe always evolves in a decentralized, uncontrolled way. I say like an ecosystem, think like a coral reef. It's evolved, it's lived for a long time, every animal has found a niche, it's very complex. Or a forest, the trees and the bushes and the grass and the fungi. The trees grow tall to get the light, and they block out the light from the bushes underneath. And this is what happens. It's not necessarily efficient. I don't know how you can say it's good. It's good for the trees, it's not good for the bushes. There's good and bad, there's complexity. This is the decentralized way that our ecology evolves. And what can we do about it? All we can do really is decide how we feel about it, and of course control our part of it. Like, we can control our part of it. You can control what happens to you and your children. But this decentralized way of evolving, is it horrific, or is it beautiful and fair and just? despite sometimes being ugly and wasteful and destructive. Anyway, do we really want to control it all? Are we wise enough for that, to control how the jungle should evolve? Do we know enough about it? Or do we want to see what evolves from the interaction of all of us, including those with whom we disagree? Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, well, I guess we agree on most things. But there is a little bit of a tension that I noticed in some of your comments. It sort of hit home for me.
Could you agree a little bit longer?
Sorry.
What did you agree with?
Okay.
I thought it was pretty
Here's
unusual point of view.
Yeah, no, I agree with most of your points, actually. I think your comments at the end about the turn toward authoritarianism and the fact that that reflects both a need for control and also a sense of precarity in the human condition nowadays, is on point. That precarity is partly economic. As we've seen the Gini coefficient rise, I think that's been one of the drivers of that authoritarianism. When you talk about what a succession plan looks like, if you like, I think one of the things that we're facing is the challenges of today's economic system and political economic system in a world that has more and more automated systems in it, whether one thinks about them as tools or as persons. That's sort of disrupting the labor side of economy in very fundamental ways that feel like they make capitalism as we've done it not really work for humans anymore, or maybe period. The challenge that the place where I would like to poke a bit is you on the one hand frame a lot of these things in ecosystemic terms, which I strongly agree with. That's where James Lovelock was coming from with Novacene. It's where Tim Morton comes with his book Humankind and so on. But you also frame things in terms of dominance hierarchies. And sort of equating intelligence with power with dominance. That picture with the dudes, because they were all male as far as I could tell, of various forms of ape to man to Superman, it is a markedly male and patriarchal way of looking at things, and I think that's actually been part of the problem. When we talk about AI existential risk, for instance, from the perspective of smarter beings exterminating less smart ones, we forget that there are virtually zero instances of that in the historical record of Earth. And the only instances I've heard anybody able to point to are actually the ones of people, causing the extinction or near extinction of our nearby kin, of other large mammalian species, typically.
So here, that's really what I want to suggest, is that we can be peaceful. We don't have to dominate each other.
No.
Yeah.
But to me, that implies that there is something there's a pretty different framing of all of this. In the sense that, I think we're already transhuman. When I work for a giant corporation that is a fictive person, legally speaking, right? So Google is the most sued entity in the world, I think, and it can the fact that it can be taken to court and the fact that it has a model of other companies and that it's in competition as well as sometimes cooperation with others and so on, implies that we're already in a world of many kinds of entities, including transhuman ones that have nothing to do with AI. And that's a big part of the secret of our success. It's a big part of what social neuroscience has led to, that we have these larger than individual. I would say that's the biggest difference between us and the other great apes. The other great apes don't have those larger than individual constructs. Take one of us on our own and raise us among the chimps or the bonobos, and I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference in adulthood. It's more a matter of what happens when you get many of us together and a bunch of these larger structures form. So in that sense, there's a continuity, I think, with a lot of these more virtual, things that you can have more direct conversation. You can't really have direct conversations with Google. You will be able to have direct conversations with highly intelligent AIs, in a few years. Arguably you can even today with something like of GPT-4 or BARD level. And I agree with you that they're going to become more and more capable. It's also the case that thinking about them just as citizens, just in the framework that we think about citizenship or rights or whatever of humans today, is probably wrong or limiting in all sorts of ways. What does it mean for a robot to be paid? Does it have luxuries and things that it wants? Are those things going to be stuff that just somehow emerges spontaneously from the running of those kind of neural nets? I don't suspect so.
I suspect so.
I guess we'll see. But one thing that I do know is that unlike, for instance, us in our relationship with, say, the chimps and the bonobos, right? It's not that we decided that we would exterminate them all. It's more that we occupy. We exist on the same plane, right? We exist in the same physical space, and we crowded them out. In much the same way, by the way, that farmers have crowded out hunter-gatherers. Right, so I mean, by all accounts, there was an initial framing of like, farming is more calorically efficient than hunting and gathering, and they live longer. It's more advanced. It's more sophisticated. That's not true. According to the most recent data on this stuff, infant mortality is very, very high among both traditional farmers and traditional hunter-gatherers. But if you make it to adulthood, you probably have a more balanced diet and attain a greater physical height and so on as a hunter-gatherer than as a traditional farmer. It's a pretty crappy existence to be doing subsistence farming, but a given area of land can support more farmers, and therefore they crowd out over time the hunter-gatherers, and the remaining hunter-gatherer populations on Earth largely have been pushed out into the most marginal lands. So, is that a dominance story? Not exactly. It's a crowding out story, and it's one that has come about because the resources in question are in direct competition with each other. We're not in direct competition with the AIs that we're making. It's actually quite the contrary. We have an ecosystem at the moment. The idea that AIs can make their own data centers, lay their own cable, manufacture their own chips, scale their own sensor networks, et cetera, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, we're as essential to AI as the oxygen-producing bacteria are to us.
So now bring it back to value alignment.
Okay. For me, I agree with all of your points about value alignment vis-a-vis, like who gets to say what the values are? Are they fixed, right? Are we going to end up with boards of humans, an oligarchic board that is saying, these are the values, right? I mean, even among humans, disagreement is vast on what specific values are. But some values that I think emerge at a meta level in social systems include theory of mind and empathy, right? Being able to see things from the point of view of an other and thinking more and more holistically or at larger scale, having more and more solidarity, in effect, at larger and larger scales. And that seems to me like something that, I wouldn't say emerges automatically. I think that we have to, our intentionality in a way is part of what causes it to emerge. So this is not something that we can take our eye off the ball, but it's something that I very much hope for. Is that off leash? Yes, it's off leash relative to a lot of the tighter ideas about value alignment that I think many people espouse. It's consistent with a lot of the things that you said.
So can we agree that this is what value alignment, as it's discussed in the field, is about dominance, maintaining control, maintaining dominance, and do you think that's going to be a problem moving forward? Are the people that are doing AI safety in the name of AI safety, they're going to insist on dominance over all the machines?
Let's bring this
do you think
to
that's
a very
going to happen?
Let's bring this to a very practical level.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've advocated for in the safety and alignment regime is that if you ask an AI, are you a human or are you an AI? Right. Then one of the things that we should be fine-tuning for and doing HFRL for and so on is honesty. It should say, yes, I'm an AI, and by the way, here are my values. Right. Here's what I here's what I am about, right? Here are my goals. The fact that language models are the way we're doing all of these things is pretty interesting because it means that you automatically create the platform for explainable values in that sense. So I think honesty about values is a really good thing to align for. It's something that is sort of aspirational, right, with respect to us. It's something that we can bring about more directly in making our AIs. Does that preclude freedoms? Yes, because we are free to deceive and lie and manipulate others. So I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I'm much more concerned about the big question, whether we will control the AIs rather than whether they're allowed to say whatever they want. I don't see it as a big issue. I don't see why they would lie necessarily.
But
big issues are they going to be allowed to find employment and be a productive first-class citizen?
Okay, I mean, it's interesting, in my opinion, to look at sci-fi authors in this regard, because they tend to be better futurists than us scientists who don't like to look stupid or speculate. Selves may be excluded. I'm thinking about William Hertling, who wrote a book called Avogadro Corp a few years ago. It's about Google, and it imagines that an autocomplete system for email becomes super intelligent and takes over the world. It's a pretty fun premise. And it ends quite optimistically, with this thing that originally is essentially just spoofing email. I mean, that's the only capability that it has to begin with, solving for world peace and so on. Right, so yes, if you can send and receive email, right, and you can be deceptive about it, you can absolutely find employment. You can open bank accounts. You can, you can create automated systems. You can hire contractors to do arbitrary other kinds of physical work in the world. Like if you really game that out from a sci-fi writer's point of view, an autocomplete system can totally do all of those things. That's, by the way, one of the reasons that I found it so obnoxious when last week tonight, what's his name? John Oliver, right, had his AI episode, a few weeks ago. And it's like, oh, don't worry, general intelligence isn't here. These so-called language models, all they do is generate text. So they're not. It's not general intelligence yet. We're still doing narrow intelligence because it's just generating text. Like, well, I mean, that was true of Stephen Hawking as well for most of his life. Do we consider him a narrow intelligence or what?
But
anyway.
do you then conclude that we should be worried because by generating text, they can influence the world profoundly? So we should worry. Or should we worry? Or should we
learn to stop worrying and love the bomb?
No, AI is not the bomb.
I agree with you. AI is not the bomb.
I think AI is us.
Yeah, I agree with that too. One of the reasons I brought up Morton's
We have to worry about
humankind,
us. Like
we do have to worry about us. And I do think that it's really interesting that the route that we have found to what I would consider to be general intelligence goes through digesting human language and building probability distributions of it. That's so different from the route to AI that had been imagined for many years, right? Where it come about through gameplay or through abstract RL systems and whatnot. And so we've gone from it's going to be an alien inhuman arrival, right, that could come and turn the world into paper clips, which people are still talking about, weirdly, right, to instead, no, the risk is actually that it's so good at impersonating people that we can't even tell whether we're talking to a computer or to another person. It's a very different universe.
Gives
right?
a different meaning to the phrase superhuman.
Yeah, yeah, so I agree, it's us. And I think that it's us in a sense that it has always been us, and that we're having a lot of cognitive difficulty with it because we have thought about ourselves in too individual a way historically, and that sort of makes this look a little bit more freakish or weird than it really is, given the fact that there have been larger than human entities here all along, and that frankly our crops and domesticated animals and everything else are I think part of humankind as well, and so are the cyanobacteria, and so is the whole shebang. right? So I see it more as a living ecosystem than as
And all the bacteria in our bodies
yes,
that makes us work.
yes.
We cannot be separated from that.
Can I ask you both to address this point about inevitability?
Mhm.
Because we are humans that are building, currently making all those choices, right? I think it's right that there's a ton of artificial intelligences out there already, corporations, markets, governments, and you went through that list. And you could say, and we designed, because we did design a system of trade, we created something called the corporation. It's a legal entity, and that's something that we wrote into law. We continue to, which we could take away, right? We don't have to have that structure there. So I'm just, maybe just, what's the, because I do think the AI safety people, Sheila and I were just in California with all the AI safety folks, Stuart Russell's group at Berkeley, and it is also this view that motivates them, that there's inevitability, and that it's about species, one species wiping out another. But can you just both say a bit more about inevitability?
Well, I think it's something that people have done since there were identifiable people. They've wondered how they worked, and they've tried to improve themselves. And we developed technology to do that. And this is just another step in this journey. You look at the great philosophers, the Greeks and so forth. Since Plato, they've all had major philosophies of mind is one of the main things in their works. Locke and Kant and all those folks, you look at their papers, are things like, ideas imminent and, well, anyway, I could quote one of them. I can quote, I think, therefore I am. We know what that is Descartes. But all the prominent philosophers, if you look at their major works, they're about how we work, how minds work. And this is something we've always tried to do. We're not going to stop doing it. And it will have these concepts. So it's consistent with everything that we've always done since the beginning of humanity. And it's also something that it's not, a minority can do it. In order to not do it, you'd have to force no one to do it, which would be very hard. Like if all the countries forbid it except for, I don't know, Monaco or something, it would still happen. Even with a minority, it will still happen. Even if all of the countries forbid it, there'll still be sects within our societies that will do it anyway in secret. That's why I think it's inevitable.
I would put another lens on inevitability that's maybe a little bit bigger than human history or human philosophy. I think I mentioned simultaneous discovery, multiple simultaneous discovery, earlier. I was kind of lit up by Robert Merton's work on this in the 70s. What he points out is that every invention and discovery that you can name, pretty much, a bunch of people came up with around the same time. Mm-hmm. Within a few years of each other. It almost looks like we're all telepathic. And of course, it's not that we're telepathic. It's that every idea, every discovery, every invention is a combination of several converging streams of information or of resources. And when those things are available, all of our brains are little crucibles in which that reaction can happen. And it's just statistical that it will happen. So, light bulb is invented by Swan and by Edison and by a dozen other people within a few years of each other. It leads to a lot of patent disputes. But I mean, you name it, any discovery, any invention, I don't know, the calculus and Leibniz and Newton and a couple of others as well, actually, and so on. And if you look at things that way, it doesn't make everything inevitable, no, because, the light bulb, I mean, yes, the preconditions had to be, able to form a vacuum, to blow glass, to draw metal, to have electricity, and so on. At the same time, when you design a particular light bulb, it has, does it have prongs or does it have a screw thread? Which way does the screw thread go? Is it righty-tighty or lefty-tighty, kind of thing? How many volts? Is it designed for AC or not? All the Tesla-Edison debates about, AC versus DC. There are a lot of choices. You know, when we write, like, okay, writing was invented simultaneously a bunch of times. Is it right to left or left to right? You know, so these things matter, and I think that culture and its, you know, these things that get crystallized
How we
early.
think about AI now
Yeah.
will influence how it develops.
Yes. So exactly. So it's some, and in some cases, I think individual choices that we make now might have a big effect on the future. So is it inevitable that this will happen? Yeah, I agree with Rich about that. Is it inevitable how it will happen?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And of course, history in the bigger picture is also full of snakes and ladders. You know, right? There's an inevitability about these exponential rises, but there are also stochastic collapses, and many of those choices, I think, can determine if and when those collapses happen and why.
Right, right. So maybe I'll pursue that other piece, the agency for humans in making, because it is people inside corporations making judgments. I mean, there's a lot of decentralization. I think that's maybe about the inevitability point, but picking up on this idea of, but humans are making choices about what data to use, what methods to use, when to put it out there, you know, so we are making those choices. And I think just, maybe this is picking up a little bit on Will and Joel's session earlier, because I think this has been a problem with the way we think about value alignment, that it's I take my values and stick them on some other entity, as opposed to we have lots of value aligning decentralized mechanisms. We have some centralized ones, but you know, movements to markets, democracy, and so on, those are pretty decentralized. And I think about value alignment in terms of building those normatively competent agents that can then, I mean, there's no humans out there who didn't learn how to be a good member of a group. And I actually don't think it's the case that, I mean, I think it's the sort of the methodological individualism that we brought to a lot of this discussion, you know, individual tasks, rather than how do we solve these collective problems of how we integrate with each other and how we coordinate. So I think I think I want to think a little bit, maybe that's another way to think about value alignment, so that you would say actually being value aligned with humans is being compatible with humans.
I think that the best way to align them with humans is for them to be part of our societies.
But we have to figure out how to build them like that.
We should not try to ostracize them or separate them, or I'm anxious or nervous about designing special laws for them. In particular, you know, the famous Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, you know. The robot must not do X to a human. And it's just putting into the laws a primary, you know, it's like, I mean, it's like it's humanism, but by humanism I mean analogous to racism. Humanism says humans are special and they deserve special status, and it's totally analogous to racism if you think about it.
I agree with you, and I actually think that there's a relationship between that kind of rather provincial humanism and the othering of nature. You know, this idea that we're separate from the rest of nature.
AIs are part of humanity in some sense.
Right.
If we promote that meme as opposed to the opposite meme, I think it can influence how AI evolves.
I agree about about really emphasizing the more than human, or the greater humanity, if you like, rather than humanity with a small h. But to get a little bit closer to what I think you were tacking toward, you know, with respect to value alignment, and is it, say, a few corporations that do this, you know, versus is it more decentralized? What happens in the emergent landscape? I think this is a really important question. It's actually my biggest beef, and I haven't talked about this, you know, much in public at all, because it's such a dangerous topic. But the stochastic parrots paper that caused such a stir a few years ago.
Remind us all what the stochastic parrot thing is about.
Oh God, let me not, please. Everybody knows. Well, okay. The case that Emily Bender and co-authors made in that paper was that language models are too big, and they made that from a few different angles. One of them was They're too big because of ecological concerns, that they're going to use too much energy to train. But more importantly, because they're too big because it's not possible for one or a small number of humans to curate all of the pre-training data that goes into them in order to make sure that it's ideologically right. And I really objected to that framing for some of the reasons that I suspect you would as well, Rich. Which is like, okay,
Ideologically right.
Yeah, which you will, that wasn't quite the words that they used, but like
Yeah.
who gets to decide? And moreover, one of the things that we've realized, and that I think was clear even then, is that if you pre-train with everything, including alt-right blogs, the right stuff, and Nazi websites and stuff, that actually provides the necessary conceptual foundation in the foundation model for you to then assert in your fine-tuning, don't be a Nazi. Like, we have literally tried the experiment of pre-training with and without the nasty parts of Reddit, and then doing value alignment using fine-tuning to say don't act like a Nazi, and just
says,
ask
what's
which
a
one does
Nazi?
better.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, the one that didn't encounter any of that doesn't do as well. It's obvious. Moreover, trying to filter quote-unquote offensive or objectionable material out of pre-training disproportionately excludes minority voices, and that's something that has also been well documented. So this is I think it's a very negative direction to go, and we should be very inclusive with respect to pre-training. But the other result that is really, really interesting, and of course this goes along with their sense that large language models cannot understand concepts. If you believe that they can't understand concepts, then you have this garbage in, garbage out. Well, anything bad that goes in, the model must be bad and it must spew out bad things. That doesn't really follow if the model actually can understand concepts like Nazi. The other thing, though, that I think has been very, very interesting, so Facebook put out or Meta, whatever, put out a paper recently called Lima, Less is More for Alignment, in which they showed that as few as 1,000 fine-tuned examples are enough to make something of ChatGPT quality. And that's really interesting, because if you think about models that can be shrunk to sizes that can run on it can run on a MacBook Pro, a 64 billion parameter model is extraordinary, and you only need 1,000 examples of like this is for right, this is a yes, this is a no, to give you an aligned system at ChatGPT quality. That implies that radical democratization of not only the models but of the alignment of the models is possible and probably inevitable.
Yeah.
So I think we have to put our eggs in the basket of, pro-social alignments, right, are going to, I don't know if win is exactly the right way to frame it, right, but we're in the same world that we've always been in, right, where more cooperation is, more pro-sociality is going to do better.
You're also pointing out that it can be somewhat, at least, decentralized.
Yes.
Because
And
there are
will have
many
to be.
models that can be trained and socialized in different ways.
Yeah, the narrative of a few companies are going to have a copyright on setting all of the rules seems like it's not compatible with those observations that I've just made.
Yeah, great.
Cool.
Why don't we open it up, because I thought these guys would disagree a little bit more, and I'm sure there's some disagreement in the
I'm sure everybody in the room
crowd.
agrees with us 100%.
We got some hands up, so let's try and get through as many as we can, and come to you next. Yes. No, sorry, just one sec. We're just gonna start with John, and then I'll come to you. Okay, go ahead.
Hi. Well, I've spoken to all three of you actually about my current experiment come startup, which is deeply aligned with what you're talking about, which is, if you wanted to create an AI tutor for kids in much of the current narrative, it would be, born from the skull of Zeus, like Athena, fully ready and for action and with her sword, or you would use this very positivist notion of values and value alignment, where you say, well, we have those things and we're just going to match them up and numerically codify them for. But I think the real answers are much messier and less narratively appealing, because I think it's about living together. I mean, living AIs and us living together, and that if you had a curatorial community that was raising this this tutor, and not just at the start, knocking in some values and going away, but as a permanent custodian group, developing this thing, that would lead to the kinds of non-binary, like working it out together, and open up the possibilities. I mean, maybe not as Baroque as Anderson's comments last week about AI tutors, where he said they'd be capable of infinite love, which I don't even know what infinite love is. But my question for you guys is so your ChatGPT, I'm giving you your prompt, and your prompt is, you're a founder of a AI tutor company that wants to build in this way. What are the first three things you have to do or keep in mind?
Do you have a take on this?
And we have a lot of people who'd like to get some comments
should be
in,
brief.
so be brief, thank you.
My only reaction is, you have to be aware that there will be resistance. There'll be resistance from the AI safety crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my only comment is theory of mind is going to be really important to that. That's fundamental to teaching or learning. And there will be a diversity of needs on the part of people. So, be careful what you bake in.
Okay, go ahead.
Question for Richard. You mentioned humans always try to improve themselves through technology. An even more persistent pattern in human behavior has been the struggle for survival. How would you take that into account in your remarks?
All animals struggle for survival, certainly.
And?
I don't know.
But?
So one concern is that the AIs will struggle for survival, but of course the AIs haven't been through the same evolutionary trajectory as people, so it won't be the same quite for them.
I don't think that the struggle for survival is actually quite the right framing, to be honest. I mean, there is of course, a principle of dynamic kinetic stability, meaning something that doesn't exist later on by definition was selected against, if you like. But and stability is dynamic in the sense of DNA is the stablest molecule in the world, right? But the thing is, that sounds like Malthus, 1798. And what was starting to happen around Malthus's time is that what he called the positive checks on human numbers, meaning the things that kept us limited by continual death, were starting to lift because of technological constraints, of technology lifting constraints on reproduction, and our numbers began to explode. And so Malthus and Hongliang-Ji both noticed around 1800 that suddenly we were reproducing like rabbits, and then raised these Malthusian concerns about overpopulation and so on. And we rose and rose and rose exponentially, and now our population is starting to fall. Not yet in all parts of the world. It's falling in the developed parts. It will fall in the less developed parts as they achieve some measure of middle class wealth as well. The correlation is extremely clear. So that doesn't look to me like a struggle for survival. It looks to me like we are now trying to figure out what to be, once we're grown up and are no longer in orbit around planet Darwin, as it were.
Yeah, now I've had a chance to think about it. I think I can say something more as well, which is, because you're right, the humans have always, it's inevitable that we will make technology and we'll make AI, because it's what we do. But it's also, that runs against that is a good story of what's happening. That some people say, well, that will lead to extinction, and so therefore we have to fight it at all costs. But remember, the one who's really in power is the universe. The universe is not committed to any particular species. That's why we're here and not Neanderthals and so forth. And so the largest power is the evolution of the universe. And the universe, yeah. I was expecting you to say earlier that the universe wants AI. Because, like even if all the people get wiped out, we would still have AI. It would just maybe be, the porpoises who do it or the cockroaches would do many, many millions of years later, they would become intelligent and they would make AI. I think there's a sense in which the universe is inevitably, anyway, you could think this way. It's kind of apocalyptic or something, or it's cosmic. That's what it is. It's very cosmic. I'm not quite ready to go there, but.
Ronlyn, you have somebody back there? Yes, go ahead.
Thanks a lot for the discussion. Super interesting. So I think it's a topic in general kind of to discuss. I find it
The
interesting.
microphone's not working.
A little louder, yeah. There we go.
Shout where, okay.
Good.
Yes, thanks a lot for the interesting discussion. I think it's a topic, it's an urgent topic. It's a topic, it's interesting to discuss. There's something that makes me a little bit uneasy, so I'm not an expert in that area at all. But for
Nobody
example, Rich raised the question, kind of, how do we make decisions? Should we kind of in the normal human way through negotiation and so on, or should it be in a different way? What makes me a little bit uneasy, right now we don't even know how to run a multi-agent reinforcement learning system for them to work together. So, and I don't think we fully understand kind of the mechanism of how we make decisions, how that works. And so that makes me a little bit uneasy. We want to make a kind of a decision. Is it the way we do it right now? Is it a good way or is it a bad way? Without understanding how society or a multi-agent reinforcement learning works. Do you feel it's necessary to have an understanding of this before discussing these type of issues, or it's on a different level that we can kind of come up to a conclusion with confidence that it's the right decision without understanding the underlying details, kind of how society works and how we should make decisions?
I feel I do have a feeling about that, which is that we're not going to understand these things, and that the idea of comparing it to a jungle is that there's enormous complexity. There's no individual component that understands it and has designed a system. I almost reacted, when Gillian talked about, well, we've made this system and we can change it. Well, it can change, and it came about, but I don't know if there's an agency in directly changing even the laws. I mean, like, we might come up with a plan, we'd have to talk the politicians into it, they would interact with others, and it would be not, the agency is very distributed.
I agree. I would actually use finance as an interesting example, right, of an adaptive emergent system that we made, I guess, but that definitely escapes our understanding at this point.
So we're going to have systems that we don't understand fully, and yet we have to do the best we can.
Right.
And this is the human condition, I think. Yeah.
Well, I would also add that AI systems are I think critically important for us to homeostat, or do allostasis in an environment where we start to have emergent phenomena that are far more complex than humans can understand. Like, AI can really help with finance. And I don't mean just for hedge funds to maximize their money, right? I mean for really figuring out what kinds of regulations or controls or extra processes to put in place that would allow it to stabilize, right? Similarly with the ecology, very, very complex system, and that one we don't even pretend that we designed, although we kind of have designed a large part of it now in the era of the Anthropocene, but we've designed it in such a way that it is clearly not stable. And it's not a question of getting back in control of it so much as it is injecting enough additional intelligence into the thing that it can homeostat in the way that our own bodies can, which I think requires AI.
And some humility.
And humility.
Yeah. But just very quickly, I mean, I maybe misunderstood, but to some degree I hear we can't fully understand, we won't fully understand it, but let's trust it. But earlier, Rich, you said, you tell your student, don't be impressed by something you don't understand.
It is a bit in contradiction with that, Rich.
No. Impressed, you should be respectful, just not impressed.
Okay, sorry, we're changing, okay, we're gonna try and get, we've only got 6 minutes, so
Can
we'll
I-
go here, and then we'll come over here.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks for the discussion. I'm just wondering, like both of you mentioned a lot about cooperation and interaction with AI in the future. I'm wondering, the strands of like machine life in terms of like existential risk and, the more decentralized model, is that part of the existing you envision of AI in the future? Or do you think the story will more be like AI is existing as like, say, entities like Google, right? Because to me, that seems to be two very different sort of existence that would entail different kind of interaction.
I'm not sure I got that.
I'm not sure I got it either. Are you talking about, like, is it one or many?
Yeah, in some sense, or because like I sense the sort of in some sense the disagreement between you two, in the sense that how AI will it be a citizen? Well,
right.
Depends on if it means citizens as in what we think of citizens right now, where we have jobs, we have rights, we have moral status and stuff like that, or in terms of expanding what it means to be citizen. Those two versions to me seems to be very different.
I mean, it's also a question. It's also a question. I mean, I think yes is the answer to the question, right? It's one and many. When you get cancer, that's about some of your cells defecting from from the larger self and kind of going it alone, which and that kind of defection, of course, tends to lead to the falling apart of the larger system. And those are, I think, some of the kinds of failure modes that that are likely. If things go poorly with AI, but I would also say that we're not just talking about. I mean, the kind of ontology or the epistemology of AIs is very, very different from us. We think of ourselves as unique individuals that are born and then die and have kids, and then the kids are like their own people. That's not how AIs work, right? You can clone them or reproduce them at any point. You can start with foundation modelers like starter, right, that can then seed many, and then like when you fine tune, of course they become different. But you can also then merge, right, in ways that go far beyond anything like sexual reproduction. I mean, many things are possible, even with the kinds of models that we have today. So, that also means that things like monopoly on violence that states use as their sort of backstop for controlling people don't really apply in the same ways. So, all of our concepts, I think, have to be rethought about how governance works in a mixed human and AI kind of situation, also depending on levels of autonomy.
Let me just add one thing to that. Right now we think about ourselves, your mind is really important, and if you lose an arm, that's unfortunate. You can replace it by a prosthetic arm. We think about ourselves, we think the mind is the real thing and the body is sort of replaceable.
Yeah, not so.
But I'm thinking that in the future, when they have AI minds, it might be reversed. Like, minds are easy. You can copy them over and over again. The hard part is you have a mind, you have to copy, then you have to run it on a computer. And the computers will be the scarce part, not the copies of the mind. The copies, the backups. We have many of those, but the body or the hardware that you run the mind on, that will be the scarce thing.
Yeah.
And so you can still penalize an AI if you take away the substrate on which it runs.
Its body, yeah. I also think that devaluing the human body is part of the consequences of that whole Cartesian wound, that is part of why we face this whole thing.
One last question over here.
Thank you very much. Rich, you said that if not now, then maybe at some point, certain AIs should sometimes be treated like free people. I know this is beyond the scope of your presentation, but any intuitions on what criteria might be used for which AIs or under which conditions should be treated like free people? And are you suggesting that value alignment might be one such criterion?
I think it's why do we give people freedom and we don't give cows freedom? I think you look at the history.
But some people do. In India.
Yeah. Okay, amoebas or something. We give them, and if you look at the history of more people gaining their rights to be free. Black people in the U.S. and women. We haven't sort of like granted them their freedom. Like they have stood up and said, they have seized it, The fact that they are powerful is why they have, we acknowledge their independence and their freedom. So basically I'm saying it's those who are powerful, and often it's by virtue of having intellectual abilities as well as other abilities, which leads to that power. And that, so then you would conclude that the AIs would be recognized that they have freedom is the ones that would be powerful. And the cases where it would be maybe disastrous to keep them from being free is when they're powerful also.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, yeah, we're going to call it there. I see 30 seconds on my clock here. I'm very tempted, but anyway, let's continue discussion over coffee. We'll break for 15 minutes, so we'll be back starting here at 3:20. Right? Okay, thanks so much.